Representative Newberry also has a bill to put in play, House Bill 7584. Would you like to introduce that?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to start off by saying that although I introduced the legislation, I'm not actually advocating that we pass it per se, which is unusual, I know. But I do believe strongly in the concept. I put it in to generate discussion. In retrospect, it might be better to convert it to a study commission, which sometimes in this building does produce good results. I introduced this last year. People may have forgotten about it because last year was the redistricting year. But we just went through redistricting. We do it every 10 years. Redistricting is inherently political. I've said it publicly many times. You can't take the politics out of redistricting, but you can kind of minimize it. Having been through it twice myself, I know that this past year, though it had its share of controversy and some shenanigans, the most noted being the last-minute switch in the Senate, which nobody in this chamber had anything to do with, it was a lot better than it was 10 years ago when it was really, I would say, out of control. But the bottom line is, I give credit to the leadership, current leadership, for making it better. But the bottom line is, I don't think the way Rhode Island does this is good. A lot of states have moved to independent commissions and try to do things differently. It is very difficult politically to make this change in a redistricting year because, let's all face it, incumbents like their districts generally. That's politics. We all play that game. I'm not going to say that I didn't try to have influence in how districts are drawn. That's the way it works. That said, it doesn't mean it's the best way to do it. I checked the math. I think last time around, I think just less than 1/3 of the House was here for the redistricting 10 years ago. So if we're going to make a change for 10 years from now, politically, it's easiest to do it now. It's going to go every election we have leading up to 2030, it's going to get harder and harder. So this particular bill is modeled after the way the state of New Mexico does it, which was upheld in a constitutional challenge, so I know it's valid. I'm not wedded to anything in this bill. That's why I suggest a study commission. There are all kinds of different ways to do this. There are all kinds of different theories on how to do this. I would like to see us change the way Rhode Island does redistricting, and obviously it doesn't matter now. It matters for 10 years from now. Let's do it while we're all here now, and very few of us have a real stake in what happens in 10 years. That's why this bill is in play. This may not be the time to pass it, but if not this year, maybe do a study commission and pass it next year. Hopefully I'll still be here for that, but whoever's here should do something. So thanks.
Thank you. Any questions for Representative Newberry? Representative Corvacey.
Would you suggest a joint commission?
Yeah, absolutely. This would have to be something the Senate would have to buy into as well. And I want to be clear. I have no problem with the fact it's a political process. I'm very open about that. It is. It's politics. And no one in the public should be offended that politicians play politics. That's life. But we have an opportunity now to do something that will not affect most of the people here, and therefore it'll be easier for most of the people here to get behind.
Any further questions or comments for Representative Newberry? Okay. We're going to, actually, there's just 2 witnesses on your bill, so we can take those now. John Marion and then Steve Allquist.
Great, thank you. First of a couple of bills for me tonight. Thank you to Representative Newberry for putting this in. We testified on this when he put it in last year as well. We think there are many good features of the bill that we highlight in our written testimony, but we don't think it solves the fundamental conflict of interest, right? There are actually features in here that are trying to weed people out who might have a conflict, such as the relatives of legislators. But the fundamental conflict is that the legislature controls the process, even in this bill, because it controls 4 of the 7 appointments to the commission. So while having 3 independent commissioners is a good thing, ultimately they can be outvoted by the legislative picks. That said, I just want to highlight 3 things, compliment you on 3 things that I think are particularly good. It's those 3 alternative seats that are chosen by different mechanism, barring the use of political data and requiring that a written sort of narrative explanation accompany the maps. And I just want to point out that all 3 of those features were incorporated in the Providence City Charter in 2012 for their ward boundary commission. And it was a very similar situation. There had been a controversial redistricting process in Providence in 2010, and then there was a charter review commission that put it forward. The councilors voted to put it on the ballot because, quite honestly, they are all term limited this year. And so there was political will to make a change happen the next time, to echo Representative Newberry's point. That process so far has been better, right, than the state process. There are two lay members of the commission. The chairwoman literally accompanied all 15 city councilors as they met with the redistricting consultant, who was the same consultant that the state employs, to make sure that political data weren't, and partisan data weren't incorporated into the maps. That process is yet to be concluded, and the city council may still have the ability to meddle with those maps, and I suspect they will try. But the commission worked better, as this commission would. But ultimately, leaving it with the legislature to ratify the final maps is the fatal flaw, because they're going to be political, as Representative Newberry said. And so the way to remove the politics to the best of our ability is to put it in the Constitution and create an independent commission. So, thank you. I'm happy to answer a question.
Representative Newberry.
Yeah, I do have one question. I don't necessarily agree with you about leaving the legislature not as the final authority, at least to validate. But one of the things I like about this particular bill, and I didn't write this, so I'm not taking credit for it, is the fact that the commission has to put forward several alternatives. One of the things I don't like about it, and I could see games being played, is they could put four alternatives that are all so slightly different that they're different, but they're not really different. I would appreciate, maybe not while we're standing here today, but some suggestions on how to make sure there are four truly different alternatives, how you would define that in such a way. Because, as you know, when the map making is done, it's drawn. You have a starting point. No matter who does it or how it's done or how fairly it's done, you got to start somewhere. And with our geography, it's harder than, say, Iowa. You start in Newport, you're going to get a very different map than if you start in Westerly or Burrillville or Cumberland or Pawtucket. So that may be one way to do it, but you get very different results if you look at it that way. So again, maybe not tonight, but if that's something we can talk about.
I'll reach out to my colleague in New Mexico and ask them if they had
how do they get different versions? Because if you get truly varying maps, then the legislature still has to make a political decision, but at least everyone knows what's going on. So,
okay. Thank you.
Any further questions for Mr. Marion? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Allquist, welcome.
Hi. As many of you know, I covered the process of redistricting in Rhode Island, this time very, very closely, and it was constantly heralded as an open and transparent process, but we all know it kind of wasn't, right? And while public meetings were held around the state and people were invited to speak, in truth, every important decision made was being made in a secret sub-basement office here in the State House, where every single representative and senator was given the opportunity to redraw their district, losing some voters, scooping up others, and strengthening their districts to make their re-election easier. I call this process thoroughly corrupt, and I stand by that. I also want to say that the very low bar of being better than 10 years ago is a very low bar, right? 10 years ago, court cases, crazy amounts of stuff going on. This bill is a beginning of doing something better. A truly independent redistricting committee is a must for just the public to know that we're doing anything at all properly. The ability of the General Assembly under this bill to jump in at the last minute and approve any maps, I think, brings up problems that we're starting to see in Providence. I'm hoping Providence does well, because I think the process getting there was excellent. I've been following that very closely. I did a great interview with Jessica Signa, who oversaw that, and I thought it was really an open and truly transparent process. And again, it didn't make maps that made everybody happy, right? There was a whole bunch of people who were unhappy, happy with different aspects of it, but it made for better maps in the end, and it made for a truer sense of what I think of as democracy. This is democracy, and it seems to be just being stolen when we do things like just to protect and strengthen people in their own districts.